I'm Catey. I'm the lead statistician at Moorfields. I've been there probably now for about 20 years. We've all been talking about research, but one of the problems is different people understand different things by research. And so what my talk is going to do is just talk about all the different types of research that people can do. One thing I've discovered being a statistician is the minute you say you're a statistician, people look at you in horror. Some people detest the word statistics, and there's a phrase they're all familiar with, which is lies, damned lies, and statistics. Now, Francis Galton, who's a very eminent statistician, who was also brilliant in lots of other areas, but he was good at statistics, he said that he found data and statistics joyful and beautiful. Now, I've looked at spreadsheets of financial data and I find them completely and utterly tedious. The only data I have interest in is medical data. And I think medical statisticians are a slightly different breed of statisticians in that we focus on ethics, we try and design studies of high quality. This is research being done on human beings, and we try to make it as good as we possibly can. So that's my plug for statistics. So I'm going to talk a tiny bit about what is research. I'm going to talk about how it used to be done, so what it was like when I first came to Moorfields, what it's like now, and believe me, it is very different, and how you can get involved. So medical research is designed to provide information about health or disease, and we learn about how our bodies work, how people get sick, what can be done to prevent disease, what can be done to treat it, but also research covers how best to look after you if you've got the condition. And there are many different types of research, and one of the problems is that studies can really only answer one question very well. No single research study will answer everything brilliantly. And one of the problems is people do research, try to answer lots of objectives, and end up not answering anything very well. So my role is to try to focus in on something so that when you do your bit of research, you've truly answered a question well. When you talk to people about research, they often think of clinical trials. They think about new medicines, new drugs, and clinical trials are often viewed as a very high standard of evidence if you're looking at efficacy of a new drug. So clinical trials will answer questions like, is this new treatment safe? Does it work? And if it works, is it as good as what's currently available, or is it better? So those are clinical trials, and I think a lot of the talks today have focused on clinical trials, but that's by no means the end of research. Now, one problem is that when you do one clinical trial, you get an answer, and then you get another clinical trial that says exactly the opposite. And you'll see this in the media. You'll read 1 minute that if you're pregnant, don't drink. Then you'll read, actually, drinking through pregnancy might be okay. And then you read something different. And you're left thinking, what on earth is going on? All these different studies are saying different things. And one area of research now tries to synthesize information from all the trials that have been conducted to give a definitive answer about the question. And this has really been championed by something called the Cochrane collaboration. They've been eminent in involving patients and the public, although they do describe them as consumers, so that's a slightly different term. When I was asked to give this talk, I had a look at what the evidence is there on blepharospasm. I must admit, despite the fact I've worked at Moorfields for a very long time, I haven't had much to do with blepharospasm. It always hits me like this. I I'd worked at Moorfields for about 10 years, and my brother developed keratoconus. I'd never heard of keratoconus, which is an eye condition. It doesn't matter how long I'm there, people come up with conditions that have never crossed my way before. So there is actually a Cochrane systematic review that looks at Botox for blepharospasm. It's quite an unusual review in that it found there were very few high-quality trials looking at this, but nevertheless concluded that there was evidence for Botox. And the authors argued that the evidence from the other types of study was so strong that it would be unethical to do a trial in this area. Now, deciding whether something's unethical really needs people with the condition to contribute to that discussion. So that's something you might like to think about. I have no idea what it's like being treated with Botox, but that's, something there. And you've heard also about different doses. High quality trials might establish what doses are best, although it's not that simple. If you've got a condition that is affecting different bits of your eye in different ways, then it makes it difficult. But you don't just have to do interventional studies, you can have observational studies. So you might simply look at a large body of patients over time and discover things that are commonly in those people. And that's how you elucidate that commonality has contributed to their developing that disease. This was how it was learned that smoking could cause lung cancer. That was done in a cohort, not of patients, but in doctors. And so you can do cohorts in lots of different ways. There's a case control study you can do where you interview people with a condition, you interview people without the condition, and you try and identify what's different, because that will then give you clues as to what might be causing this condition. Those sorts of studies capture quantitative data. And in the olden days, that's pretty much all we did. Nowadays, that's not enough. We understand now that we have to look at qualitative data, so descriptive data, listening to people. How is this condition impacting on your life? Because that can be a very powerful statement when you're writing a research grant, trying to make funding go into your area. If you spell out what this condition does to people, then you can convince funders to put money into that area. It's a competitive market, and you're up against other conditions that might be more obviously needy. So when I started at Moorfields, it was typical that studies were done by doctors on patients. Sometimes a statistician was involved, sometimes other healthcare professionals were involved, but there was never really patient involvement in terms of designing and conducting the studies. The patients were there, but only as the objects that the trials or whatever was being done on. The landscape now is completely different. And one would hope nowadays, and certainly it's the case at Moorfields and the Biomedical Research Centre, that research is done by research communities. We get together leading experts in different areas. So we'll have a statistician advising on statistics, we'll have the clinician advising on the clinical aspects, we might have a psychologist looking at psychological aspects, but we also have patients and their relatives, and indeed the public. And that helps ensure that the studies that we do actually have meaning and make a difference. There's no point us doing trials on a drug saying this is better than this, if actually that treatment patients won't take. If they're not going to use that treatment because it comes out with some nasty side effect, then we have to listen to that. And so there are lots of different ways that you can get involved. But Andy, I'm going to go back to that slide, because Andy is now going to get you to engage with some research.